Welcome to Dark Magazine. Today I'm interviewing Adam Richard, who is
Hi.
he's born and bred Victorian in Melbourne. He is what's known as a personality. He's a he's a comedian, writer, radio presenter, and general all-round media personality. He's involved in everything from musical quiz shows Spicks and Specks to sci-fi TV series Outland, from Tom Gleason's comedic interview series Hard Quiz to the Doctor Who themed TV show Whovians. At great personal risk, because there is no way I'm participating in an on-air duet, even if it is inspired by Julie Andrews, I think we should start at the very beginning. Feel free to perform a solo if you feel so inclined. Now, you've held down a variety of jobs while working your way up to the dizzying heights of being too famous to even keep your own website up to date. When did you know what you wanted to do? And how did you keep working towards your goals while you were selling fast food, working in a bank, working as a cleaner, and all sorts of glamorous jobs like that?
Many glamorous jobs. Well, most of the working in the bank started because I was at university for a total of 4 weeks. And
4 weeks?
4
Wow.
weeks. And I was doing cinema studies at La Trobe University in Victoria, and we had to watch The Man Who Knew Too Much, the Alfred Hitchcock film. And there was a discussion about whether Doris Day sang Que Sera Sera in the film because it was integral to the plot, or just because she's Doris Day and she can't get enough of that song. And I had a moment with thinking, I can talk about Doris Day at the pub. I'm gay. We do this all the time. And I quickly got out of there the day before I would have incurred a HECS debt. So I have no tertiary education. I have done more since, but I don't have any qualifications. I haven't finished anything education-wise since I finished Year 12. I went off and got a job at the bank, and ever since I was 5 years old, I have said I wanted to be a writer. I could read when I turned up to school in primary school. I taught myself to read by watching Sesame Street and reading the TV paper.
Oh, I lived by Sesame Street too.
Yeah.
I remember.
Took a long time for me to get talked out of saying Z.
I was in grade 2. I was 6 years old, and my teacher just ripped into me for saying Z.
Yes.
It was very traumatic.
Yeah, you got taught very quickly in the 70s. Terror. I have always wanted to be a writer, and I went and after I finished working at the bank, I kind of left and went and lived overseas, did that, teenager trip to London for a year and a half. And when I got back, I worked in various adult bookshops. And because it's one of those jobs where you just sit there for ages before anyone turns up. So I had a lot of spare time, and I went back to RMIT and studied professional writing and editing because I had all this spare time in the office to do my work, like while I was sitting there at the desk waiting for someone to come and buy a dirty movie. So then that kind of weirdly led me into doing stand-up. I was doing spoken word performances. I had friends that were doing stand-up. And stand-up is the ultimate – stand-up comedy is the ultimate expression of you being you. Like, there's no editor but the audience. There's no one who can tell you what you can say, what you can't say, other than the audience, the people who book you. But, and also, you don't need to write narrative if you don't want to. You could just write a series of unrelated jokes. So, and I've always wanted to be a writer, and mainly what I read as a kid was Doctor Who. I read Terence Dick's books and all of those Target books like a crazy person. I used to buy them, I think there were 3 for $1 at a secondhand bookshop in Brunswick where I grew up. So I have a massive collection of Doctor Who books with other people's names written in the front.
Is that ever confusing?
Not really, but, they're all very well worn. Like they'd all been read several times before I got my hands on them. I was big into recycling even as a child.
And you've got your Cyberman T-shirt shouting out your love of Doctor Who.
Yes, it's kind of rainbowish.
Oh, okay.
It's my Camp Cyberman T-shirt.
So you're talking about a combination of Doctor Who and rainbows in the one, in the one breath and in the one T-shirt.
Yes.
Was there any kind of link that you made to Doctor Who and being gay, like early on, maybe?
Look, I know in England, because it's a very different scene of fandom in the UK, where being a Doctor Who fan was kind of shorthand for being gay. Like, a lot of Doctor Who fans were gay. Yeah. It was because, it's very different in Australia because we had it on every night of the week. Like, kids grew up with it. It was, a thing. Whereas in England, it was on for once a week for a few months of the year, and then it was never repeated. So they became weirdly obsessive, and no one gets weirdly obsessive like a gay person.
Or a sci-fi person.
Yes. It's the worst nexus, gay sci-fi fan. Hence, my TV show Outland.
Outland, yes, absolutely.
But yeah, so one of my issues I had when the show came back in 2005 was the romantic frisson between the Doctor and his travelling companions. Because when I watched it as a kid, there were these women standing next to the Doctor, and as far as I could work out, they were best mates, like I was with most of the girls when I was a kid. So, I would play Barbies with my friends, with my Doctor Who doll. My sister's Barbies were always running off with Doctor Who. At one point,
There's going to be a Doctor Who Barbie doll, I heard.
Yes, I'm so excited.
It's going to be the first Barbie doll I will ever own.
I've put in a pre-order. But yeah, it's I was always quite camp even as a child, and so I saw Doctor Who not necessarily as a gay man, but as someone who was not interested in women. And sure, as time has gone on, I've made very lewd jokes about the fact that he spends a lot of time in what looks like a toilet, hanging around a portaloo. Not having any romantic interest in women. But yeah, it's that kind of, and the 2005 series, as much as that irked me, there was so much other diversity going on in the show that I kind of went, I'm kind of fine with the fact that the Doctor's maybe kissing people, because there's people like Captain Jack and
who was very
omnisexual.
Yeah, that was really groundbreaking for Doctor Who. Like, he was right out there.
Yeah.
I actually found him disappointing in Torchwood because he wasn't the same character.
Yeah, but he kind of, if you think about the character that you meet in Doctor Who, the one we meet in Torchwood has been through a lot. Yeah. Like, he's lived since the Victorian era, basically. So he's been around a long time.
He's jaded.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's tasted everything he possibly could. Having said that, on a tangent, I'm absolutely loving the Torchwood audio plays from Big Finish. They are amazing. They've kind of jazzed up the theme a little bit. It's a bit more heavy, and just like, as an ongoing series of Torchwood, it's exactly what I would have wanted it to be. Like, because I was never, I loved Children of Earth. That was probably the only one that I really loved. But yeah, I think the audio plays they really hang together well and really well written, performed.
So tell me a bit more about Outland. Not that, let's pretend I haven't seen it. Tell me about Outland.
I've spoken to you about it before.
Yeah, maybe.
It's a 6-part narrative comedy series, was produced for the ABC by Princess Pictures, based on a stupid idea I had once where John Richards, my co-writer, we were talking about, various ideas, things we could make, a pilot for or pitched to a network. And we'd gone through all these convoluted, weird meta ideas that, would take 2 pages to explain. And then I just went, oh, you know what? I've always thought it'd be funny to do a show about a gay science fiction club. And he just went, oh, yeah, because he's also a sci-fi fan. And it's just, that moment where you go, yeah, like you can just see the characters in your head as soon as you say gay science fiction fans. You're like, oh, yes, I know many of them, and they're all insane.
Yeah, and you don't have to be gay to be insane either.
No, you don't have to be into science fiction to be insane either. But like I was saying before, that nexus of obsessive behaviour with people who are both sci-fi fans and gay, and the crazy collectomania that can go on, and the obsessive, people who hew to continuity, and you just want to shake them and go, it's a story. It's not, your life's not going to end if people don't adhere to the way it was written before. But yeah, it's very funny.
I'm just thinking about Doctor Who and activism. Do you think that it's an expression of your activism at all?
I don't know. I think it's just from a purely personal level. Like, I had a very troubled relationship with my dad. So I think the Doctor was always, a paternal figure for me when I was growing up. So, yeah, it was just sort of someone, sure, that I didn't know, but someone whose behaviour, while capricious, made more sense than the erratic behaviour of the alcoholic man who lived in my house.
And I personally think of the Doctor back in that era would make a really good role model, whether you're a male or female, really. I mean, apart from when he's obnoxious and insane, but
But yeah, I grew up in the Tom Baker era. I started watching at the very end of John Pertwee, so they're both very kind of patrician, very fatherly figures. You always got the sense that their companions, be it Jo or Sarah or Leela, that it was a sort of a mentorship as opposed to any other kind of relationship. It was sort of like
as opposed to dancing in the TARDIS.
Yes, but yeah, it was like a surrogate parent-daughter relationship. So yeah, there was so there was something. Which later on, when Romana turned up, it became a little flirty, but more sort of equals. But yeah, there was sort of a kind of parental relationship going on, which I think I responded to as a kid. Looking back now, I wouldn't have said that then. I just would have said, I like space stuff.
How do you think that your activism has worked out in your career or in your life?
I've never really been that much of an activist. Like, I often get a lot of flack about, not performing for the community, as it's called. Not like I would much rather perform for a straight audience, for want of a better word. But, just a regular audience. Like, my radio job was a mainstream radio show. It was, the number one show in Melbourne for 10 years. And the same with Whovians. It's just a regular TV show. When I was a team captain on Spicks and Specs, I was not there because I was the gay person. I was there because,
you're funny.
Hopefully.
And you know a lot about music. And
weirdly, I know. More than I even knew I did. But yeah, so it's there. You do kind of like. I wouldn't say I felt guilty, but people are like, "Oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" And it's like, well. What's the, and this is, I guess, the activism part of it is like, what's the point of preaching to the converted? What's the point of talking to a room full of gay people about gay issues? Like, they're aware of them. They're fine. They either deal with it or they don't. But for me, it was more about just being a gay person doing a job that anyone could do. So, being on the radio was not about, I wasn't there because I was gay. I mean, technically, yes, because they wanted someone who did celebrity gossip, and we seem to be good at that. But, it was every year, whenever I thought, I've had enough of this. It's 4:00 in the morning. It's 5 days a week. It's 42 weeks a year. It was very exhausting. And every year I'd be like, oh, maybe I don't want to do it next year. And then I just would think, oh, you know what? Like, our main audience is mums driving kids to work in the car. And if I just being there, not talking about my sexuality that much, like just being a gay person who's open about their sexuality on a radio show, if that makes one kid feel like it's easier for them to say to their parents that they're gay when they get to that age, then it's like, oh, well, maybe I have a tiny responsibility to accept all these hundreds of thousands of dollars for talking crap about Lindsay Lohan every morning.
I think personally that there is a lot of strength in not being the, like, you on your Wikipedia page, you're listed as, first of all, as under living people, Australian radio personalities, Australian stand-up comedians, Australian male comedians, comedians from Melbourne, and RMIT alumni. And then you're listed as a gay entertainer, LGBT entertainers from Australia, and LGBT comedians. And to me, that gives you a strength, because you're not the gay comedian first. You're the comedian who is gay, so you have an audience to the wider community that you wouldn't necessarily have anyway. I mean, look, otherwise, that's what I mean.
I get that, and it, when I first started performing, one of my mentors, who is now sadly no longer with us, but Dave Grant, a great comedian, said, you don't need to talk about being gay, and I was like, he said, you're funny enough, like you don't need that as a crutch, basically, and I was like, yeah, I thank you, I get that, but I feel like I do need to talk about it, because no one is. Like, back then there was Sue-Ann Post and myself. We were the only gay comedians. Like, we were the only gays in the village. And now, look, we've got, Tom Ballard and Joel Creasy and Nath Valvo and Reese Nicholson. Like, we've got Zoe Coombs Ma. We've got Hannah Gadsby. Like, a genius. I remember meeting her, like, after she did Raw Comedy in, when was that? Years ago. And just going, oh, thank God. Thank God there's more people coming through. But it was difficult back then, like being the only one, essentially, the only gay male comedian.
Do you think that you've paved the way to make it easier for others? Because people are like, this guy is funny.
Yeah,
he's
maybe.
funny for us.
Yeah, maybe. Look, it certainly wasn't my intent, but if that's helped, then great. But I think it's just for me, it's just been, I'm just glad there's more people around. So I now have peers who I can talk to about this experience and not have to be like, look, you don't get it. It's very difficult backstage where you're surrounded by a lot of very blokey men talking about their dicks, and you've got to go on and be like, oh, I like football. It's great that there are people that I can now kind of empathize with, as opposed to, having this weirdly singular experience. Look, I think if anything, because physically I don't look like what I think the stereotype of a gay man is, that's always been a bit of a thing in my favour, where it's like, oh, well, we were expecting someone to turn up in gold sparkly shorts and a leather harness. And I rock up just like in my tracksuit pants. Or a suit if I'm feeling professional. But so I think it's just about challenging people's expectations about, I remember when I was doing Spicks and Specs, we had a complaint once where someone said, you know what, we all knew Alan was gay, but he didn't go on about it all the time. I'm like, he's not gay. He's just very camp. And I don't go on about it all the time. I go on about it just enough. If I went on about it all the time, like I did a podcast for a while called Talking Puffy, the Puffcast, which is revolting. And we talked very frankly about a lot of gay sex and other things. And I'm like, if I went on about it all the time, you would be horrified. Because I can go on about it, but I just sort of, I just want to make sure no one's in at all confused.
Yeah, well, I had a I did a master's degree, and one of my subjects was sexuality, and my tutor was gay, and that was an eye opener. I learned things that I never knew.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying. I had someone come up to me at a live podcast recording on the weekend in Brisbane. I was doing the little Dum Dum Club show. And this guy comes up and goes, I was listening to you on the Green Guard Letters podcast. And he goes, I've never laughed so much in my life at the concept of courtesy fingers. I was like, oh, man, what was I talking about?
Should I Google that?
It's the euphemism is it's a discreet knock at the back door to let someone know you're coming in. I used to have a whole routine about anal sex where I never talked about anything specific. It was all in euphemism. And I had this woman come up. That was the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. I went, I didn't even swear. Like I was using things like talking about the shop shutting, standing on a piece of Lego. Like there was never once a moment where I said anything medical or used any kind of swear word. It was all in euphemism, and people found it completely offensive. And I'm like, yeah, so you find the act offensive, but the guy before me had been swearing like a trooper and he was fine.
I recently read Gail Carriage's San Francisco werewolf series or something, and that's all about gay werewolves and relationships, and there was enough romance to keep me absolutely hooked, and there was enough medical fact to teach me quite a bit. It was an eye-opener.
Oh, I remember on the set at Outland we had this book, and I was asking John, I was like, what is this ridiculous book that Ray has supposedly in her house? Christina Nu's character. And he goes, oh, it's a weird subgenre of unicorn erotica. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah.
Ouch.
Oh, I know. Yeah, there was the research that even the people doing the set dressing in Outland I was like, this is amazing. Like this is was pretty full on. I
can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're planting specific books and stuff.
Yeah, I mean these were things that were never seen on screen. Like they were just there. We'd be like, well, what? And I was like, well, yeah, Ray would read that. That is the kind of thing she'd be up for.
Yep.
But yeah, I was amazed at how deeply people got into the crazy subgenres that there are in science fiction and fantasy.
There's one book that I have albinism. You wouldn't know it because of my beautifully coloured hair.
You've been colouring in.
Yeah, I've been colouring in. Yes, I was looking for books on albinism, and there's one book, Jungle Jim and the Zombie Albinos of Gore or something. It's like, and that's erotica.
Yes.
And it sounds like everybody's getting into it, even like the good guys and the bad guys. I mean, I haven't read it, but I read the blurb.
They sound very busy.
They're very busy, and it's just like, wow, okay.
Is there, albinism's usually one of those things where people who have it in any kind of fiction, it's like a shorthand for untrustworthy, evil people.
Often Nazis. Yeah.
Often Nazis. Are there positive betrayals? Because I've been watching, I started watching Black Lightning, and have you watched Black Lightning? Yeah, like the main bad guy is an African American person with albinism, and I was like, well, at least he's powerful. Like he's normally it's kind of like an underhanded sort of behavior that they're imbued with, but seeing someone who's like quite powerful and sure he's still a bad guy, but it's a very different take on someone with albinism.
I find that character to be, I love him and I don't. And people in the albinism community, the general consensus that I'm getting is that people generally don't like him because it's yet another evil albino. But yes, played by an actual African American with albinism.
That is amazing.
Playing an African American with albinism, they haven't done a bad job because albinism always goes hand in hand with vision impairment.
Yeah.
And they've worked in things like he has photophobia, which means bright lights hurt his eyes. Mm-hmm. They've kind of missed the bit where if it's too dark, you can't see either. But,
Sure.
and there's a bit where it looks like he's reading a book, just like, someone who's not vision impaired. And it doesn't look like it's a braille book and it doesn't look like it's got large print or anything. It just looks like it's a normal book. So they've got some things wrong, but generally speaking, they've got it right. And there was an episode where Tobias Whale, the character, goes to confront his father. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox. He goes to confront his father. And his father talks about, I even tried taking care of them twitchy ass eyes of yours.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like, he's got nystagmus. And I'm bouncing up on the couch and I said to my husband, does he really have this? And the next scene, in the next few scenes, you got close-ups and you could see that Tobias had the shaking eyes that are nystagmus.
Wow.
And that's something that develops when people can't focus as babies.
Yeah.
And it looks like he genuinely has nystagmus. This is the first time ever in any medium that I recall ever coming across a character with albinism who has nystagmus, although some of them have vision impairment. But it's like this is the most accurate representation. And I'm personally convinced that having a guy who actually has albinism playing the character is influencing the writers and influencing the show.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Well, that's what happens when you make long form television is that, you do start to be able to, as a performer, you can go, I see what you've written here. This wouldn't happen. And they go, we need it to happen for the story. And so you just kind of, they go, but for next time, we'll keep that in our back pocket. And you can, even like something as simple as Spics and Specs. Like I would sit down with the researchers and they'd be like, okay, what kind of music are you into? What do you like? And, so they'd go through, areas that I might be good at. So if they're writing questions, they're not going to write anything which nobody answers. But yeah, even there were sometimes there'd be a question that I'd answer. They're like, that was not in the list of things you knew. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't know what I know. Which is how I think I ended up working on Hard Quiz.
Because you knew too much.
Yeah, I know too many things.
So what's it been like working on Hard Quiz? Like, because sometimes you're in front of the camera and sometimes you're behind.
Well, I've been actually enjoying behind more, to be honest. Like it's all care and no responsibility. Like Tom gets all the hate, and I just get all the praise. But yeah, I love it. It's seriously one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. Like it annoys my sister because I do it in Melbourne, so I often go and stay with her while I'm working on the show. And I'll get home from work and I'll be like, oh, Michelle, guess what? And she'll be like, I don't want to hear any more of your did you knows. Because I'll come home with some sort of stupid fact about sharks or, like my favourite one lately is that shark skin is made entirely out of teeth. Like it's bad enough, the mouthful of teeth.
Is it really?
Yeah, sharks, like they have scales essentially, like the fish. But the scales, they used to be called placoid scales, but now they're referred to as dermal denticles. They have roots, pulp, and they're covered in enamel, which is, the harder substance in the natural world. So each tiny, you can't see them, but you can see them under an electron microscope, but each one is a tooth. So if you brush a shark one way, it's fine, but if you go the other way, you can cut yourself.
I knew the skin was rough, but wow.
It's made entirely of teeth. All of their skin. Yeah. You thought the ones in their mouth were bad.
So how many people are you planning to give nightmares to?
Oh, I love it. And also they can, here's the most terrifying things. You know how they've got an amazing sense of smell. They can smell blood from miles away. Also great eyesight. They can see like a twitch from a really long way away, which, you know, given they can constantly need to hunt, how do they cope in a storm, for instance, at night time? They've got, I don't know if you've seen on a shark's skin, they've got those little dots. Looks like they haven't shaved properly, like sort of like a 5 o'clock shadow. They're called ampullae of Lorenzini, and they are filled with a gel that is the most conductive, naturally occurring thing for protons. They can sense the very faint electrical signal of the heartbeat of a seal from about 1 kilometre away.
Wow.
So they can eat you in the dark in a storm.
Speaking of eating you, I know you're the comedian, not me, but do you want to hear a funny story about a shark?
Yeah, go.
Back in the 80s, I was at a friend's place and the news was on, and I saw these two blonde boys on the beach being interviewed, and I'm thinking, they're my brothers. No, they can't be my brothers. Surely if this involved my brothers, somebody would have told me. Nah, it was my brothers.
Oh, bless.
My brothers went home for the holidays. They're at boarding school because their father's was an abalone diver. So, and they bring home one of their friends from school, and they go surfing off Shelley Beach in Tasmania.
Right.
Anyway, so this friend, Dean is his name. Dean's never been surfing before, but my brothers, they're Sean and Julian. Yes, my parents were Beatles fans. They've been surfing since they were, could barely walk. They've been on boards. Anyway, so my brothers and their father all shot off onto the beach, and poor Dean is stuck out because he's not used to this, and and he's trying to get in. Anyway, so this shark, this is a true story. This shark circles him, and he knows his lunch. Anyway, at the last minute, he leaps off the surfboard, and the shark bites the surfboard, leaving toothprints in the surfboard. Now, somehow or other, Dean managed to get back on the surfboard and get back into shore. That's not the punchline. Dean then went to Duntroon because he's joining the army. And one of his assessment tasks was he had to jump out of a helicopter into some water. And he's got a phobia about water. And it's like, well, what do you think's going to happen? A shark attack?
Well, the shark wouldn't have, once the shark tasted the surfboard, it would have gone away, because it would have realised, oh, there's nothing there for me. Because, like, from underneath, people on a surfboard look like seals.
Tuna, I heard.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But yeah, and great white sharks anyway, need like their bladder is 1/3 of their body, so they need to constantly be eating blubber. So they eat mainly aquatic mammals, so your whales and your seals, mainly seals. So yeah, when they get onto a person, they're like, there's no fat in this thing. Like, they just swallow it and go, that's no good. So they won't, if a shark bites you, he won't come back for seconds. So if he gets on the board, if he eats a bit of surfboard, it's like, that's not what I thought it was.
We'll get rid of that appetizer.
Oh, no, they swallow it. They're very...
Oh, he didn't actually take a bite out of it. He just left toothprints in the surfboard. And Sean kept the surfboard like that as a trophy for years, and then one day he just decided that he needed the surfboard, so he filled in the holes and started using it again.
That's great. But yeah, sharks don't want to eat people. It's not their And one of the main reasons they've been attacking people in the last 50 years is because of, we stopped clubbing seals, baby seals, which they were clubbed for fur. So seal populations have boomed, and there's a lot of food where people swim. So the only reason sharks are eating people is because they've come there for the seals and they've eaten the wrong thing. You know when you go to a buffet and you pick up a bunch of stuff and you're like, oh, I don't want that, but it's on my plate now.
I want the documentary, the Adam Richard Shark documentary.
I'm actually I've been learning so many insane facts. I've been toying with doing a stand-up show about it, but at the moment I'm getting on and working full time, and having a stand-up career is a full-time job. So at the moment I'm doing Whovians, and I start Hard Quiz next week, and I'm a senior writer on that show, so it's a lot of work. It's finding the time in between impossible. But I would love to talk about sharks. I'm obsessed with sharks. Not just sharks, but I could talk about Meryl Streep. That was someone's topic that I got obsessed with. Thunderbirds, which I loved as a kid, and someone came on the show and their topic was Thunderbirds. Gorgeous Liv, who was on, I think, last week's episode. She was amazing. I've really kind of, I throw myself at my topics. I get very excited by them.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. Fancy getting paid to do research.
Oh, it is amazing. It's like, I'll be like, sometimes I'll be sitting on the couch watching a documentary on my iPad and be like, I'm really at work.
One thing I really wanted to talk to you about was the Doctor Who's episode this week with Rosa Parks.
Oh, wow.
It was fictional, for those who haven't seen it, it's a fictional retelling of the true story of Rosa Parks and the civil rights movement in the USA. Now, I'd like your thoughts on it, but also how much impact do you think that the real story had on the queer community? Because, that was about race, but I don't know what your opinions are, but I think a lot of minority groups, they've followed each other in pursuing civil rights, and they've influenced each other. And the Black Panthers, I don't know if you know this, but the Black Panthers actually joined the disability movement with their strikes in San Francisco back in the 60s or something. So, we can be allies, we can be I was so impressed when I read that. What are your thoughts on this?
Basically, like watching that episode and seeing an entire race of people being treated as worthless, as is in the original meaning, as worth less. Like one person's life is not worth less than someone else's. So seeing a whole group of people treated like their lives are not worth the same as everyone else. I had a very, very difficult time with the marriage equality survey, the plebiscite, the mail.
Would you like to talk about that a bit more? And then
it was. It was not as an issue that I really cared about. Like, yes, I think equality is important. From a financial point of view, it makes sense to be able to get married because it would cost you upwards of $20,000 to get a lawyer to put everything in place that a married couple gets automatically under the law. So, and still it's contestable. Like before marriage equality came in, it was if someone's parents decided they wanted your house that you and your partner had paid off, they could fight it and often would get it. And things with medical treatment, just a whole bunch of stuff. It was very difficult to put that in writing, and even if you did, it could be taken to court and overturned. So now we have, thankfully this blanket of marriage where we have the same rights as any couple. But yeah, just how much airtime was given to an opinion, as it was called, of the no people, it kind of emboldened people to be more horrific in public. I saw a lot of people just being horrendous, terrible graffiti that went on around town, kind of. There's a great painting of George Michael that was defaced in Sydney. It was he's painted as a saint with the halo and everything. Gorgeous, gorgeous image. And some guy just turned up with a bucket of paint and painted over it like it was horrific. So, that kind of people feeling emboldened to do that kind of thing. And also I found it awful on the other side that, people that I knew, people who were my friends, were being horrific to average, everyday Christians because the more hardline members of their community were the ones being awful. And it's like, just as we're not all tarred with the same brush, like, so neither are they. Like, you can't be horrible to a whole group of people. Like, two wrongs don't make a right, as my mother used to say. So it was a very difficult time for me. It was, the cost was very, very high. I lost a friend who took his own life. He took a deliberate overdose before the announcement, and so when it finally came through, he was still in a coma, and then the funeral was about a month later, and I was a pallbearer. And it just, I don't know whether that was the thing that tipped him over the edge. Most likely not. But there was such a feeling in the air of not being worth as much as someone else, like being told constantly by media, by social media, that you are worth less than other people in this society. And, I had a lot of therapy. I ended up taking antidepressants for the first time in my life. Like, it was it was a difficult time. And, I'm quite a robust person when it comes to mental health. So, I can't even imagine what other people were going through. Like, the fact that I was having trouble, and, I've been quite open about my sexuality for a very long time. And for the first time since I was a teenager, I was starting to feel like, life would be easier if I just wasn't like this. And that is not the way we should feel as any individual in this society. So, knowing that other people were going through that was kind of helpful in one way, but also it was just like, we shouldn't have to go through it. Like, it could have been done one afternoon as an act of parliament. It's why we vote. We vote for a representative government. We don't do direct democracy. Otherwise, why aren't they doing this for every issue? Why don't we have to all vote on, how much money that gets given to some mysterious Great Barrier Reef Foundation? Like, what? That seems to be able to be done one afternoon between two people in a cupboard. So,
with no political advisors there, with no public servants there,
Yeah.
against people's advice.
Yeah, to a company that has extreme ties with the mining lobby. Anyway, so it's that was a huge problem for me. So watching this episode of Doctor Who, watching Rosa, I just seeing that people had to sit somewhere else on a bus. Like, there was a physical representation of an emotion that I felt much of last year, and I just thought that is horrific. Also, just in a historical context, like, that had the Civil War in America in, a century prior, and people were given equal rights. Like, everyone in the country was given equal rights under the law.
In theory.
But in practice, like, the southern states enacted their own laws, like this segregation law, that were completely in contravention of the Constitution, which, they like to pull out at the times that they need it in America, but when other times they're like, oh no, we can do an unconstitutional thing here, la 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 la. So it was like that incident with Rosa Parks on the bus was 70 years or more after, all people in America were declared as equal, and still it wasn't for another 10 years or so before, the federal government stepped in and said, actually, all of these laws are illegal, and equality is still not a thing in real terms. You can go to court, you can, in the law there is equality, but it's a fight, and it shouldn't have to be. It should just be automatic.
And it's an expensive fight.
Oh yeah, it's not. As you're discovering this week.
Oh, I've spent about $15,000 on lawyers' bills this year to try to get disability access and equity at uni, and I expect to be expelled. So, in theory, there is
Yes.
equity.
That's where activism comes in. It's like,
Yeah.
well, this is your experience, and you know that other people are obviously going to be going through this. So this is where it's like, yeah, I might lose this particular battle, but the war will be worth the winning.
Eventually, yes, absolutely.
You know, and it might not be for you personally, but for the greater good. That was my other favorite thing about the episode, was like, even though it structurally hit the same beats as, say, Back to the Future, that is a story about one person's very selfish pursuit of his family's happiness, or even just his existence. It's like, I have to change history for my existence, my personal existence. Whereas this episode is about, we have to maintain history because of the greater good, like because of what it does for everybody. And I know when people I hate when people go, you know, oh, this has changed things for this community or for this group. It's like, no, it changes it for everybody. It makes things better for everybody. No one is actually taking away anything from you to give someone else rights. You know, it's which is what I think people get caught up in. It's like, if gay people can marry, then that's going to invalidate my marriage. It's like, no, it doesn't. Your marriage is still fine. It's the same argument when people go, oh my God, they've ruined Ghostbusters by casting women. It's like, they didn't tape over the other ones with the new one. They're still there.
I watched the original around the time I watched the new one, and I don't think the original stood up to the test of time very well, but I love the new one.
Yeah, and look, you know, there's some great stuff in the original one. Sigourney Weaver has, if nothing else, has provided a delightful shortcut for my sister and I when she goes, do I have too much makeup on? And I go, yeah, there is no Dana. There is only Zuul. She's like, okay, I'll tone it down.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that's code for too much eyeshadow.
Oh, that's classic. So,
I know, it's good.
so you're saying basically that the civil rights movement had a positive impact for everyone, and
Yeah.
I totally agree. Do you think that there is any specific positive impact for the rainbow community? I'm just thinking because a lot of the books that I've read about disability activism, it's like women came first and they used a certain model to fight for their rights, and then coloured people came second and they tended to use the same model, and then disability activists, and I haven't really read that much about the LGBTQIA movement.
I mean, it is essentially the same model. I mean, the thing was, like, we, and this is probably something that's going to disappear, which is a sad part of equality, is that, you know, there is change inherent in anything like that, and change can be terrifying, change can be difficult, and this is a change that I was dreading, and I still am, you know, a bit sad about, but without the need for, you know, a lot of people get kicked out of homes when they're kids, like, or have done in the past. And so we had a need to kind of band together in like ghettos. We'd all live sort of in the same suburbs, or go to the same clubs. But now everyone meets online. It's much more acceptable to be gay. So that kind of thing has sort of stopped. Like, there's, you know, you don't find those enclaves like you did in the past. And there's no need for that kind of rebellious culture, which it was. Like, you know, like drag queens were always a symbol of visibility. It's like, look at me, I'm a gigantic man dressed as a woman. Like, it wasn't about gender, but being a drag queen was much more of a protest kind of thing. It was much more of a, you can't ignore a 7-foot man in a dress. Like, it's you can't ignore me as someone adopting all this femininity to basically say, yeah, I am not a building worker. I cannot do the things that you want to do. So, yeah, that kind of attitude is obviously not needed anymore. But there goes also a lot of art, a lot of culture. It's like often there's with people who have hearing difficulties. There's often deaf parents loath to let their children have surgeries and things like that because it's like, well, there's a language that is at risk, so yeah, it's one of those things. It's like there is something we're going to lose by gaining equality. We're going to lose a great big chunk of our culture, a great big chunk of our the ghettos will be gone, the communities will be gone. But I think that what we gain is probably better than what we're losing. So it's just, it's just a difficult transition period that we have to go through, which is sad. But, but yeah, I think it happens with anyone. Like, I mean, I guess the thing with disability, though, however, is you're dealing with, and I think trans people have the same problem as well. It's such a big collective of different people with different needs. It's why the NDIS has been such a disaster, because you're talking about specific people with one specific need, and they're trying to go, we'll make this. We've got a big block to put in lots of tiny little round holes, and it's like, yeah, you can't do that. And so, yeah, getting people to agree, and one person's needs are completely different from another's. So it's different than, say, a race or a gender or a sexuality, where you are dealing with lots and lots of small individual trials and difficulties with accessibility and acceptance. And yeah, so I think it's a very different fight. It's going to be I think a longer and more complicated battle.
Yeah. But still, I mean, what you're saying about drag queens, I never thought of it like that. But then I'm a woman who's nearly 6 foot in my socks, and people have told me that at times that they think that I'm a drag queen. I mean, not that I've ever been that glamorous. I kind of envy guys who can, they're more feminine than me.
But yeah, that's not like, trans people are different. Like transvestite, like men who just like to dress up as women, that's a different thing. But it's like the drag queen performers is kind of what I'm talking about. The RuPaul's Drag Race kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that sort of. It's about visibility. It's about, because unlike someone's gender or race, there's nothing specifically that marks you out as being gay. Like you can't tell from down the street, unless you're a 6 foot man in high heels, or, you're a woman in a very masculine outfit. Like it's like, that's the only, like, kind of dressing up is the only way you can mark yourself out as a member of a clan. So yeah, it was always about visibility in that way, as opposed to, this is a kinky thing that I'm doing, which is what people assume it is. It's like, no, it's just about challenging people's conceptions about, that they have about what it means to be a man or a woman. And now, obviously, that's something that's gone through towards, transgender people, which is a completely, again, we're talking about a large group of people with lots of individual needs and wants. And, yeah, it's again, a difficult battle for those people for acceptance, because of, we're talking about instead of one gigantic group that it can be identified, it's lots of individuals. And yeah, it's about finding frameworks, I guess, for that to push an ideal.
Yeah, and some of the issues, I read this book, it's fiction, but it's written by a woman who, well, her and her husband adopted a child from Korea, I think. And then this child was trans. So they found that they had a girl, and they had all these issues. So the author has researched this, and then she's written a fiction novel about a family, a large family, and the title is "This Is How It Always Is," because everybody in the family has different issues, and the trans child in the story is just one member of the family with a particular set of issues, which are very important and they impact on the whole family for various reasons. But it's just one member of the family. It's so. I just found it was great. It taught me a lot about the issues because I've heard about drug treatments and stuff like that. And in the book, she talks about the pros and cons and doesn't ever reveal what decision was made. So that's not a you should do this. It's like we're going to have to make this decision, which I thought was fantastic. And yeah, again, it was just so well done. And it was one of those books where you laugh, you cry, you know.
I love those. Oh, you asked me about my favorite books or any kind of writing about diversity. And I know I was talking earlier about, you know, me being like the marriage equality thing is probably one of the only times I was quite, you know, vocal about a political issue with regards to my sexuality. But mainly, you know, most of my comedy is just comedy. Most of the work I've done has just been, you know, the work I've done, it's not been about a gay audience. And one of my favourite writers is the science fiction writer Connie Willis, who I absolutely adore. And she said she often got that in her career. It's like, why aren't you writing about women's issues? You should be writing about women's issues instead of just these entertaining novels about people, you know, travelling in time or falling in love. So she went, okay, I'll write about the women's issue. And she wrote this amazing short story called Even the Queen, which is set in a speculative future where you can have a tiny little bit of surgery done and you don't have your period anymore. It's not a thing. And so, of course, the main character's daughter, youngest daughter, is involved in a movement to let's have our period again. And it's one of these hilarious stories where there's all these, you know, high court justices and, you know, all these people who are her friends all running around going, what is wrong with her? Why is she doing this? What's going on? And it is, and the title Even the Queen it refers to, even the Queen gets a period. So it's she just was like, okay, you want a story about women from a women's perspective? Here is the women's issue. And it is hilarious. It's very, very funny.
I'm going to have to hunt it down.
Oh, it's in a short story collection called Impossible Things. But yeah, Connie Willis is great. She writes these big blockbustery novels that are, the best ones are set at Oxford University in the near future, where there's time travel. And so when you're doing your history degree, you have to do a prac. So you have to go back and just sort of, you know, observe and not be caught, basically. And yeah, there's one amazing. The first one is called Doomsday Book. Oh, there's a short story called Firewatch, which is set at the same thing. There's the Doomsday Book, which is a great, huge novel, and I read in '92, and I've read it like twice since, but it is an emotional roller coaster. Then there's a comedic one called To Say Nothing of the Dog, which is set in Victorian England, and it's kind of like a comedy of manners. And then she had one that came out maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, which ended up being an 1,100-page book. So it was split into 2 books called Blackout and All Clear, which is set during the London Blitz. And yeah, essentially she's writing science fiction romantic comedies, for want of a better word, but they're so much more involved than that. Like, she's a great writer, but yeah, just page turners and fun, and you'll laugh out loud reading one of her books.
That sounds like exactly what I need at the moment.
Yeah. But yeah, some of her short fiction can, you know, sometimes be a bit depressing, but there's there's a book called it's a novelette, I think, called Last of the Winnebagos, which is basically, we imagine the end of the world being this just single moment, and it kind of looks at it as a series of just events. And sometimes, I look around at the world we're in and it reminds me of that story, and I'm like, has it ended? Are we at the tail end, just kind of hanging on? So yeah,
That's
full
a
on stuff.
bit of a worry.
Yeah. But yeah, she's my favourite writer. I absolutely adore her.
Is there anybody else that you'd recommend apart from your own work, of course?
I really I read a lot of comic books. Like, my favourite thing at the moment is a piece called Saga, which is up to issue 50, I think. But you can get them in collections, written by Brian K. Vaughan, illustrated by Fiona Staples, and they have created this amazingly adult space fantasy. It's kind of a space opera, but it covers a huge, there's a huge collection of characters. And the thing I love about comic books is like the works of Dickens, or like we're getting now with, whole seasons of shows being on Netflix, is that episodic storytelling that can paint a huge narrative picture. Like, I love that kind of thing. And I feel like, we've gone away from just reading one book or watching one movie. We want long narrative stories. So yeah, Saga is great. And it starts off as a sort of Romeo and Juliet pastiche about two enemy combatants from two different worlds who fall in love, and but in a very modern, very physical way. And then it just, spirals out of control with it's a fascinating story, and characters who you absolutely adore, who do very honourable things, then go on to do hideous things. You're like, why? And it's that, when writers kill their darlings and you go, I wish you hadn't, but God, this is a satisfying story because you did. So yeah, it's epic and wonderful.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? I mean, oh yeah, we need to know what you're doing now, because you're incredibly busy. But is there also anything from what we've discussed that you'd like to add something?
No, I think, we've talked about heaps of fascinating stuff. I mean, I think, just from a writing standpoint, I love anything wildly popular. Like, I've been reading Stephen King's Dark Tower series very slowly. And I just read, I think it's book 4, which is set mostly in the past, Wizard and Glass. And I'm just like, you forget what a masterful storyteller he is. Like, he's just so skilled at creating a place and creating characters. And you're like, oh yeah, there's a reason he sells so many books. It's because they're good. They're really good. So, I think it's, something like, I love Doctor Who, and it's like, don't be afraid of things that are popular. Like, maybe they're popular for a reason, and maybe you'll like them.
What did you think of the Dark Tower movie?
I did not see it yet. I'm holding out because I was loving. I was halfway through, I think, the 3rd book, which I read as an audiobook while I was driving Melbourne to Sydney, and like white knuckle grips on the steering wheel. And that's the other thing with Stephen King. He writes so wonderfly, as he writes stories that could be told. So as an audiobook, they are perfect. They're the perfect audiobook. There's not, you're not trying to delve into too many layers of, I tried to listen to an audiobook of Life of Pi, but it's so kind of poetic and it's so dense that, the writing is so dense, you have to sit with it. So it's I gave up after the first chapter and ended up reading it. But yeah, I love anyone that can write for audio is I love, because I've got to do something while I'm walking around.
This is true.
Yeah.
So what's happening for you now? What should we watch?
Well, Hard Quiz, which is every Wednesday on the ABC, and Whovians on Monday, and obviously Doctor Who. But yeah, I'm starting season 4 of Hard Quiz. We start pre-production now, pretty much. I start next week. For next year, yeah. Yeah, we finished season 3 in April, and then I went on to work on the weekly for 20 weeks, and then Whovians started, and now I'm doing both Whovians and Hard Quiz at the same time in 2 cities. It's very exhausting. So this is how much I love Doctor Who. Like, when I got approached to do Whovians last time, I was in the middle of series 2 of Hard Quiz, and it's not just a full-time job. Like, we work late hours. We film 5 episodes in a week. It's a very intense process. And so for me to do Whovians, which was on a Sunday, was to take a huge chunk of time out of what I was already doing, meaning I would work much later hours. I ended up doing 6-day weeks, which I will be doing again starting next week. So, and also I kind of am, I feel like I've done everything I wanted to do as a performer on television. Like I look back at all the stuff I've done and I've enjoyed it, but there's nothing that I go, oh, I'd like to do that as a performer. So I feel like I've done everything. Whereas as a writer now, I'm loving, this new life that I have. So
and the shark teeth.
And the shark teeth. I could talk about shark teeth for days. And Eleanor of Aquitaine. She's my other favourite thing. But yeah, so so I love Doctor Who that much that I couldn't say no to being on a show to talk about Doctor Who every week.
I didn't actually realise that you were on it, I have to confess. So now I'm going to have to start watching it.
It's fun. It is. We have so much fun. Like, it is. And, I know there's old school fans who get very annoyed at how, that we're having fun. Because apparently you're not meant to watch television and have fun. Doctor Who fans, I love them, but they have a tendency towards the hate. A Doctor Who fan would have trouble naming their favourite episode, but they could tell you 10 that are terrible.
It's a bit like the Star Wars fans who've chased Kelly Marie Tran off social media and things like that. It's really quite depressing. I think that's to me that's the worst part of the. But
then I think I go, well, they're not fans. They're anyone who thinks that making a new episode of something somehow implies that you're taping over an old one. They're not really fans.
No.
You can just go, oh, yeah, I don't like it anymore. Like, you're allowed to say that about shows. I've stopped watching The Walking Dead because I don't like it anymore. And it was one of my favourite shows for a long time. But I just stopped enjoying it. And you can do that. There have been periods of Doctor Who where I haven't really loved it. And, I would watch it maybe 3 months later. I'd catch up in a whole big glut. Then other times I have to watch one episode 7 times in 1 week.
It got to the point with Stephen Moffat. Like, my husband and I both grew up with Doctor Who, like you. I remember hiding behind my uncle's chair when I was maybe 3 and watching Patrick Troughton, it would have been, I think. It certainly wouldn't have been any later than John Pertwee.
No.
And, so, I mean, that's from, almost being a toddler. And under Stephen Moffat, it got to the point where I was getting Doctor Who discs for review, and my husband would practically cackle with malicious mirth. And he'd be like, I'm not watching it. And it was like this evil laughter and mockery because Stephen Moffat had ruined it for both of us. And then I received the Christmas special. I thought, well, okay, I better watch the last season of Moffat before the new season.
Yeah.
I think it was the best season Moffat did.
I totally believe the first season and the last season. So his first season, which is season 5, and season 10 are his best work on the show as a showrunner. I think his individual episodes can be amazing. But if you look at that, those were the series he was not also doing Sherlock. Like, it's very hard from a creative point of view to work on an empty tank. Like, you can't. Yeah, it's hard to do two things at once. As I've discovered, trying to write and produce a stand-up show while doing breakfast radio and also, you know, appearing on television shows and doing a whole bunch of other things. Like, it's you end up producing substandard work and you take your eyes off the ball and your foot off the pedal. And, you know, it's how something like Matt Smith's pronunciation of Metebolus gets through as Metebolus. Like, it's because you're busy on another show and you're not doing you can't do two full-time jobs at the same time because there aren't enough hours in the day. And I honestly believe that that's what happened to those. You know, the fact that he was able to make like, they're still entertaining episodes. They're just not the ones that you want to go and watch 3 or 4 times over, which is a weird thing that we do as Doctor Who fans. But yeah, I just think you can't do everything. And yeah, I think season 5 and season 10 are evidence that he can, you know, do a decent job. Apart from those 3 episodes with the pyramids and the monks, I didn't like that. But also, you know, it's also that thing of, like, don't give the fans what they want as well, because there's so much deranged continuity in many of those seasons that I just go, see, this is what fans think they want, and then they get it and they hate it. It's like, continuity it's great if it's a mention, like in the Rosa Parks episode. It's like, yeah, we get Storm Cage and we get the you know, the wrist thingy, the time wristy, as I call it. And that's about it. They're the only mentions we get from old stuff. You know, if you know the show, then it's great. It's contextualized for that particular episode. You don't ever have seen it before. And that's what I love in Doctor Who. I don't want to watch if I want to watch a soap opera, there are plenty of soap operas to watch. But, you know, I don't love Doctor Who for its ongoing narrative. I love it for, you know, Monster of the Week or historical, you know, excitement of the week or, you know, crazy scientist of the week. I don't want crazy scientist of the month.
Yeah, I think from memory, the only really big continuity in Doctor Who was the Key to Time, and that was really loosely connected.
Oh yeah, that was bookends, if anything else. It was just, you know, there was just one thing that had to drop in. Like, at the time, I was so excited about it, but, you know, it wasn't like Amy was a goopy goo person who was pregnant and she was stuck in a car. Like, it wasn't. It was, you know, if I want to watch something with a crazy ongoing narrative and really exciting cliffhangers, I'll watch Line of Duty, and they are some great cliffhangers. If you like a cop show, a British cop show, oh my Lord, are the cliffhangers amazing in that show. But yeah, and they're 6 episodes long. I feel like I'm watching Doctor Who. But yeah, it's, you know, you can get all the things you want from old Doctor Who in other forms. You don't have to force them all into your favourite show. Like, it's, you know, as much as I would love there to be a cliffhanger every week in Doctor Who, it's just not the show it is anymore, so I'm happy to let that go. But, you know, I'll find that other places.
Yeah, and the Rosa Parks episode I would personally rate as being more than 5 stars out of 5.
Yeah. It was great.
So,
except for that terrible actor who played Krasko.
Oh, the villain.
Yeah.
He was a bit meh, but he was the excuse for them to be there.
Yeah, he was the MacGuffin. Yeah. Yeah, I know. But yeah, there were certain elements of his performance. I'm like, oh, dude, you've mistaken being boring for being interesting.
Yeah, he was I have to admit, he was a non-entity. It was all about everybody else doing the thing to make history
Yeah.
happen. And it
Yeah.
was all about Rosa Parks. She was totally the central character.
Oh, and what a
Yeah.
great performance. Like,
Yeah.
she was incredible. Yeah. So good. So, yeah, I think the show's great again. I'm really excited.
I am too. And a woman with pockets.
I know. Not just pockets, but next week, a bum bag.
Oh, woman after my own heart.
Yes.
Mind you, I usually wear a backpack, but that's like an oversized bum bag.
Oh, man, I have a backpack too. I don't know what's in there. I need to clean it out. It's probably about 10 kilos at the moment. I'm like, surely there's things in here I don't need, like library books that I've got to return.
Oh, one last thing.
Yes.
Who's your favourite Doctor?
Look, Tom Baker, you know.
Because you grew up with him.
Because I grew up with him. And also, I have been listening to his audiobooks, like his full cast audios, the Big Finishes. And he sounds the same, and he sounds like he's having a ball. But after only 3 episodes, I'm going to say that Jodie Whittaker is swiftly becoming a favourite. Like, she might even be my number 2.
And that could climb, possibly.
She could, yeah. You know, there's another 7 episodes to go. I could get there.
I was always Tom Baker for the classic, but he was like that. He was my era
Yeah.
of Doctor Who. And then I loved Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, he's great.
And I kind of had to warm up to the others because I loved Christopher Eccleston. That was like a really new thing to me.
Yeah.
But I have liked them. They've all had this streak, and I've seen them in other things. Like, I mean, Matt Smith he's an amazing actor. For example,
he's great in The Crown. I think he was great in the show. Like, even when I was not enjoying an episode, I always enjoyed his performance. Like, I always enjoyed his characterization. And like Paul McGann, I think, is a great actor. And you know, that Doctor Who movie is an abomination, but
it really is. You don't have car chases in Doctor Who unless it's John Pertwee's Betsy.
Yeah, but yeah, his performance is great. Like, he is amazing, and you know, he's again, like, I keep going on about the Big Finish audios because I love them so much, but the Paul McGann stories, especially the ones at the moment where his companions are 2 of the best actors working today. Is Nicola Walker is one of his companions, and Hattie Morahan, like 2 incredibly accomplished British actors running around playing Doctor Who. It's so much fun. Like, they're just wonderful. Like, I really enjoy them. So yeah, I feel like all the actors have done amazing work in that role, even though there's now 14 of them. It's just, yeah. I love that my favourite show is still going.
After all these years.
I know.
A show that's older than us.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the
I
only...
was born like a year before my sister was born on its 10th anniversary. My younger sister. So yeah. It's been going a while.
It started in 1966, didn't it?
63.
63. Oh, look, I'm getting confused.
66 was Star Trek.
That's why. Trust a sci-fi geek to know exactly.
And someone's topic was Star Trek on Hard Quiz.
Oh, yeah. Did you go Discovery?
I loved Discovery. But again, it's, you know, Star Trek has had many, many different kinds of narratives. Like, it's been films, it's been TV shows, it's been long form, it's been short form. So it was just another type of Star Trek. And I loved it. I loved how over the top it was. I loved Michelle Yeoh doing karate on people. I loved, like, it was fun. Like, I loved all the crazy characters. I didn't like it when they got dropped to the F-bomb. That was a bit confronting. But other than that, yeah, it was... And also because it was kind of like a soap opera, I would watch it with my sister because we both used to. I dragged her to Star Trek movies all the time, and she begrudgingly fell in love with it. And so, yeah, we would watch that every Monday when I was working on Hard Quiz. And, like, we'd get to the end of episodes and go, oh, my God. Because it was so crazy. Like, it was an insane soap opera. It was
Very
an actual
true.
space opera. It was
Yes.
a space opera that, you know, that we've kind of wanted Babylon 5 to be, the space opera that you kind of want The Expanse to be. Like, Star Trek Discovery is that space opera. It just happens to be Star Trek.
What did you think of, and I can't remember the characters' names, but Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz's characters
Oh, so cute.
as the long-term, oh, they were just adorable. I know
I
that
know.
they haven't dropped.
And fighting over their opera. Also, casting quite openly gay people as well in those roles is, you know, is something to be said. Like, it's, I mean, also, I don't think someone needs to be gay to play a gay character. I'm not one of those people. Like, I think if someone can bring something to a role, then, you know, get the best person for it. Like, because we had we copped a lot of flack on Outland because we had an able-bodied person playing someone in a wheelchair. But it was one of those things that's like, we've got a woman who is Indigenous in a wheelchair. It's like one of those things we're going to have to fake. we got an Indigenous woman. Like, if we got a man in a wheelchair in blackface drag, that would have been a problem. And yeah, there were a couple of things where people were like, how did she get up the stairs? And we go, yeah, that's kind of a joke. Like, Daleks go upstairs and no one really knows how. But also, like, you know, I always see Davros as the most empowered disabled person in fiction. Like, yeah, he's a villain, but oh my God, he's terrifying.
Yeah, for me, as somebody who is disabled and I know people in wheelchairs, I would have given Outland a pass on the wheelchair going up the stairs if you'd shown it, like the Daleks. Because to me, if you'd shown that,
You're talking about ABC budgets. That's not happening.
but surely someone can Photoshop it in or whatever they do with.
Again, that time is money.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Well, maybe one day you can do like a director's cut and just add that. Because to me, if that had been in there, it would have been perfect because it would have just, addressed the issue rather than almost,
But I mean, we did like that episode. There was a lot of talk about Daleks going upstairs, so it was meant to be. You were meant to associate the two things, but a lot of people didn't for some reason.
yeah.
Like, it was like, yeah, we've said that things on wheels can go upstairs. Like, we've established that. We all believe that can happen, and so Ray is just a manifestation of our belief.
Fair enough. I'll pay that then.
Also, just, you know, in the fantasy world of television, don't you go, yeah, of course she went up the stairs. She's amazing. Look at her. She's one of the most capable. She's the most capable person in the cast. Like,
well, yeah,
everyone,
that's true.
Everyone seems to have a problem. No one seems to have a job. She's got a job. She's got this amazing apartment. She's got all these incredible artworks. Everyone else is a bit of a flake, but she is incredible. And yeah, that was always my favorite thing, that she was the most capable person in that group of characters. And like a wheelchair for her seemed to be sort of a fashion accessory, if anything else. Like, it was, you know, it wasn't treated as something she needed. It was just, you know, her thing that she had around. It was part of her character as opposed to, you know, something that was, you know, defined her. It was just a part of her. The same way being gay was just a part of everyone else. Like, her ability was just a part of her character. It wasn't, you know, this is everything I am, which I think is, you know, an important thing to do.
Yeah, well, people with disabilities and people in wheelchairs, you know, they use wheelchairs. They're a tool. There was, I mean, every time someone like Stephen Hawking dies, there are the usual obits about being wheelchair bound and all the rest of it. And the disability community cries out, what's that quote? You know, 10 million voices crying out. that no, he's not wheelchair bound. The wheelchair enabled. It's an enabler. It's like,
Yeah.
if you want to get from, Melbourne to Sydney, you're not going to walk it, are you? You're going to
No.
hop in a car. Well, the wheelchair's kind of like that. It's a tool. It's like a computer. It's whatever.
Yeah.
And
it's like when people talk about Daleks, like I go, well, the thing we see is like that's their wheelchair or their Barina or the creature is the thing inside we don't see. But, we're just seeing the equipment.
Yeah,
it's like a pair of shoes.
a lot of people forget that, but I mean, I think it was Tom Baker that introduced, with the whole, the stories on Scarrow, and then the new series has come into it a lot more. I can't remember. Might have seen Inside It with the Sylvester.
There was a few like the Davison and Baker one, but the very first Dalek story, there's very much an indication that there's a thing in there. Like they pull it out and then it goes under the mat and wriggles around.
Was that a William Hartnell story?
Yeah. The very first Dalek story. Yeah.
I think I remember a movie that may or may not be considered part of Doctor Who. Like it was kind of Doctor Who, but it kind of...
Oh, with Peter Cushing?
Probably.
Yeah.
And they went to the Dalek City?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was in high school. It was repeated on ABC.
Oh, I have that on video. Oh dear. Well, I've got to head off to a lunch thing now.
True fan. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. We've talked for longer than I had hoped, but it's been so entertaining. And
bless you. You too.
So, well, you have fun at your lunch, and
I shall.
I'll let you know when.
Oh, it's a lunch thing. It's not a fun one. You have to go to these things sometimes.
It's such a hard.
The tragedy of being a celebrity. It's very difficult.
Oh, you're adorable. You're going to have to start a podcast or do your stand-up thing or something. Maybe when you've got, surely there's a summer break or something.
Oh, look, yeah. But then I actually like to go on holiday.
Funny that.
I know. I don't want to work through my holidays. But yeah, I'll maybe another podcast. I don't know. I've done 2. Again, you end up working when you should just be having fun.
True. Well, thank you once again and have a great day.
You too. Thanks.